Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Lumlin. I'm the head of media and communications. We'll just go ahead and get started as our time is short. We have 23 minutes. If people come in, that's fine, they can take a seat. But I want to thank you all for coming. Welcome to our press conference. Today we are launching and presenting two reports, the first presented by Equal Measures 2030 and the second presented by Plan International. And I just want to thank everyone for tuning in to the live stream. As I mentioned, the two reports that are being shared today, one is the Equal Measures 2030 SDG Gender Index. This is an index that tracks gender equality progress across 129 countries, covering 95% of the world's girls and women on 14 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It is an index that will be updated every 2 years and aims to track progress on gender equality over time. The second report, which we're delighted to speak to you about today, is a Plan International report. It shines a light on girls' and young women's leadership aspirations, perceptions, and real experiences across diverse societies and economies across the globe. It is jointly produced with the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media in Mount St. Mary's University. Our speakers today will share some really interesting insights from both reports. To begin, I'd like to introduce Alison Holder to share key global findings from the index. Alison, to my left here, is the Director of Equal Measures 2030, a joint effort of leading organizations from civil society, the development and private sector, working to connect data with evidence and action on the pursuit of gender equality laid out in the SDGs. Alison has nearly 20 years of experience working in the international development in the private sector, including working on livelihood projects for women in India, small medium enterprise development in South Africa, corporate responsibility, business strategy at Accenture, and business and human rights. Thank you for joining us today, Alison.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Jessica. So I'm really excited to share the findings from our new SDG Gender Index, but I'm very much sharing them on behalf of the organizations who make up Equal Measures 2030. We are a partnership, and in fact, two of the people you see here beside me, so FemNet and Plan International, are part of Equal Measures 2030, and this has been a really collaborative effort where we're building an index together. What issues are we going to measure? What countries can we include? How are we going to ensure that we really hold governments accountable for the promises they made in the Sustainable Development Goals? And so we work very closely together to do that, and it's really great to see the culmination of a lot of effort working together to develop this index. We launched it yesterday. We had a lot of media interest in the index, and the story that most of the media outlets ran with was that no country will achieve gender equality by 2030, based on the picture that we're looking at today. And that's a pretty sobering finding. And what we also found, in fact, is no country received an excellent score on the index. And even more worrying for me is that 1.4 billion girls and women live in countries that got a very poor failing score on the index. So we have a lot to do. We're literally failing to deliver on the gender equality promises made in the SDGs for billions of girls and women. What we found was that the goals, so within the SDGs, it covers there's 17 issues. We cover 14 of those and 51 gender equality issues within that. And what we found is that some of the issues that were furthest behind were quite worrying. So the issues that the world is struggling with when it comes to gender equality, one of them is related to public finance and better gender data. So that's goal 17. Climate change, no one would be surprised to find that we're finding that very few, if any, countries are taking the really decisive action needed on climate change, and that's a key gender equality issue disproportionately affecting girls and women, and the poorest of those especially. The other goal that's really far behind is around industry and innovation. So whether women are rising into positions, research positions in science and technology, access to the internet, all of the things we know that women and girls need to be economically active and successful is a big challenge. And the other goal, kind of most worrying for me, that is falling really far behind at the global average level is SDG 5, which is the gender equality goal. And so we've got some really challenging things to look at here in terms of which issues are falling behind. I think on the positive front around the issues where the world is further ahead, so the scores were better on goals related to hunger and nutrition, water and sanitation, health and education. And the positive message that I take from that, not to say that on each of those issues there are so many gender issues we still need to tackle, but what we are seeing is that where policymakers, leaders have decided to work together, coordinate, put money, political will, funding together at the international and the national and the local level, we are seeing those issues move. So there's some really interesting stories in the report looking at progress on girls' education. Not enough, but really staggering kind of increases in one generation of girls in education. So I do like to kind of focus as well on the positive messages, and I think that's one of them. We're seeing international and national prioritization of issues bearing fruit on some of the things that we worked on over the MDG era is now, we're seeing that in the index. The other positive story for me, and this is one of the ones I've really enjoyed looking at, is that there's pockets of good news, pockets of progress, even amongst the countries that struggle on the index overall. And I think it's why we made sure that the index wasn't just a single score, because that only tells you so much. What we need to be able to do is then to go in and say, okay, so which of the goals are countries doing well on? Where are they falling behind? And even right within that, the actual detailed issues. An example is if you look at Kenya, and sub-Saharan Africa in general does struggle on the index. It is clear in the overall rankings. And there's, the countries that are at the top of the index are those that have higher levels of economic development. That didn't surprise me. It requires a certain amount of basic resources, infrastructure, public investment to fulfill rights. So it doesn't surprise me that richer countries in general do better, but the pockets of progress in other parts of the index are more interesting for me. Looking at Kenya, for example, on digital banking, they have higher rates of women accessing digital banking than 3/4 of the world's countries. We looked at Senegal, who have very high rates of women represented in parliament, around 44%. And that's changed in just one electoral cycle. It's doubled because of a quota law, parity law that was brought in Senegal. So I think the most important thing for me is let's look at, pull out, celebrate the positive stories of progress. Let's break it down and see on which issues are countries falling behind, but where are they leading? And really get behind the kind of, that one overall ranking and score really only takes us so much. And that's partly why we work so closely with partners like FemNet and our national partners in 7 countries, because they're the ones that know the gender equality context. They can take the index, really dig into it, use other data that they have access to, stories and anecdotes, to paint a fuller picture of the gender equality challenges and opportunities in all of the countries covered by the index.
Thank you, Alison. That was really useful and a great starting point to look at the index on a broader level. Now, to dig into the findings and provide a bit more insight specifically on the African continent, I'd like to introduce Memory Kachambwa, Executive Director of FemNet, the African Women's Development and Communication Network. Memory is an intersectional feminist, a women's rights activist with over 18 years of experience working on issues on gender and development, women's empowerment, and human rights at national, regional, and international levels. Thank you for joining us, Memory.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So the index has actually given us a lot of data. It gives us the evidence to enable us to do our work, particularly advocacy at the regional level, at the African Union level, and also at the African Forum on Sustainable Development level, and also at the global level, at the high-level political forum. With an average score of 5.1, the Sub-Saharan Africa region is the lowest scoring in the index. So you find out of the 20 lowest countries that are scored in the index, 17 of them are from the African continent. This is not really surprising when you also look at the situation in the African continent, and when you see what the indicators are measuring. The African continent has a legacy of colonialism. It has a legacy of infrastructure that is not responsive, particularly to the gender demands and the gender needs. So that already places Africa, most of sub-Saharan Africa, at a space where it is really scoring very much low as compared to the other regions. But this is to say that none of the regions, even the countries where we see they are more developed, have actually achieved gender equality. So one of the things you can actually see when you dig deep is to say, even if a country might have the resources, might have the infrastructure, it takes more to achieve gender equality. And what this means is we need to actually get more in terms of political will. We need to get more in terms of investment, regardless of whether or not a country does have or does not have the income. But the income and the infrastructure, they do matter, because when you look deep into what are some of the indicators, these are always contributing factors. There are also a number of issues in the region which have really performed relatively very well. So it's not all gloom in the sub-Saharan Africa region. We know when it comes, Alison spoke to gender parity, and we can see that 5 of the countries in the world which have more than 50% in their parliaments, we have 5 countries in Africa which have 50% of women in senior management positions. So this is very positive in terms of some of the measures that some of the governments on the African continent are putting. We know South Africa, we know Ethiopia, we know Rwanda are some of the countries with very high and significant number of women in senior positions. So the top performers in sub-Saharan Africa, there's Mauritius, which has an index number of 73.1, South Africa 64.9, Namibia 64.4. And the lowest are Congo with 44.0, DR Congo with 38.2, and Chad with 33.4. So some of the strongest goals is that there are also very strong performances on the index, which are found in Africa. If you look at SDG goal number 2 on hunger and nutrition, and SDG number 8 on work and economic growth. So when you look at these scores, Africa is really scored quite significantly. The SDG score on number 2, it measures things like anemic among pregnant women. And when you really look at it, it might score high, but that still does not mean that the scores for, the realities of nutrition are not an issue. They still remain an issue. It just looks at what sort of the indicators are being measured. And some of the weakest goals, performancing, when we relate them to the global averages, is a goal on SDG 7 on energy, and SDG 3 on health, and SDG 6 on water and sanitation. So these are some of the weakest in terms of the weakest goals where Africa, sub-Saharan Africa is performing. But there are also some interesting indicators which are coming out of the index, which we think are important, like digital banking. If you look at Kenya, Kenya does have M-Pesa. So when you look at the indicators which are measuring the number of women who are banked and access or penetration to the use of internet or mobile banking, you find very high numbers in Kenya, for example. It's the same in Nigeria and also other countries. When you look at some of the legislation and the policies that are in place, for example, the abortion law, you find that even though abortion remains restricted in a large number of countries, they have at least some provisions and are also moving a lot in the index. They have abortion laws which provide grounds for abortion. And these are most of the countries which have ratified Maputo Protocol and have not made reservations on the clause number 14. Women's political participation, as I've already mentioned, It's the only, sub-Saharan Africa is the only region outside of Latin America and the Caribbean where any country has fully achieved or surpassed parity in the lower house of parliament. Rwanda has 61%, Namibia has 46%, and Senegal 42%. And all these countries range amongst the top 10 countries in the 2019 SDG index in terms of women in parliament. And 6 of the top 20 countries worldwide with the largest proportions of women in parliament, these are also in sub-Saharan Africa as of 2018. And more women in sub-Saharan Africa than any region other than Europe and North America hold ministerial positions. 47% in Rwanda, 42% South Africa, 37% in Uganda. And this is compared to 28% of the OECD countries. So these are some of the findings that are quite interesting and that are coming out of this index. And this index makes a useful tool for us as a regional network to be able to use it for advocacy, for policymakers to improve policies, but to also urge them to keep on pressing, to keep on investing and putting on financing and budgeting and making sure there's move towards achieving the gender equality goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Memory, and thank you for ending on such positive notes. Now, in the continued pursuit of gender equality, I'd like to switch over and speak about Plan International's latest report. I'm delighted to introduce Anne-Birgitte Albertsen, CEO of Plan International. A renowned leader in development and gender equality, AB, as most of us know her, has worked for over 25 years in international development, human rights, change management, and diplomacy. AB has been the CEO of Plan International since September 2015, and prior to this, she was United Nations Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director for Management at UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund. Thank you for being here today, AB.
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to share the panel with our partners from Equal Measures and really congratulate all of us in that partnership for the report that has been launched and that we're celebrating also today. Linking to that report, I would like to hone in on a very, very specific finding in that report and that Memory has just spoken to, and that is that while there are some shining stars around Africa, which is great in terms of women's leadership and political participation and women taking on more and more leadership, what that report also tells us is that we need to shine a light so much more on the issue of leadership. And that's exactly what Plan International has done in the report, taking the lead, and we have asked together with the Gina Davis Institute 10,000 young women across the world in 19 different countries, in developed countries and less developed countries, in very, very different contexts, crisis countries, peaceful countries, etc. And we've asked them about leadership. And there may be people in the room or in the world, online, on live TV, that think that young women and girls do not want to lead, that they're afraid of leadership, and that they're not ready for it. I think this conference has shown us some really powerful leaders, and Maya will speak shortly as well. But what we found across the 19 countries is that 3/4 of those that we asked want to seize leadership. They want it in their schools, they want it in their communities, they want it in business, jobs, and they want it at the national level and also some at the global level. They are ready, and they feel confident about their own ability. They deeply believe that they can do it. Only 5% of 10,000 young women said, I don't feel confident about my own ability. What they're not confident about is how they will be received in the world. They are deeply concerned by what they see in terms of the treatment of existing female leaders. And a staggering number, 93% of those that were interviews, 93%, that's basically everybody, said, if we step up as leaders, we will be sexually harassed. We will be abused. we will see discrimination. We know that the barriers to actually exercising our leadership are so overwhelming. And that is so disturbing, to listen to young girls that want to lead and are afraid of how the world will receive them. And what's even more depressing about the study, before we get to the positive, is that the more leadership experience young women have, so if they have actually tried to step up and do the leadership despite all the barriers, the more they are convinced that they will feel the barriers and be harassed, including sexual harassment. So it gives us some very, very, very powerful insights into the feelings of young women. It really does shine the light on the need for us to create a completely different narrative about leadership, about having massive public campaigns to ensure that leadership is a safe space for young women, for old women, for any women. And maybe finally, I want to celebrate, despite all these barriers and despite the feeling of fear, those young leaders that are with us here at Women Deliver, those that are on the streets striking for a better future, those that fight for girls' education around the world, because they are overcoming some incredible barriers to be the leaders that they are today. Thank you.
Thank you, AB. That was very powerful, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Maya, who is certainly one of the leaders overcoming those barriers and boundaries. 19-year-old Maya is a Plan International youth advocate, a passionate activist for gender equality, who comes from a marginalized rural community in Indonesia. She has led several campaigns in her province to end sexual violence and has engaged with the government and other agencies to champion for girls' rights. She's an active member of Youth Coalition for Girls, a Plan International Indonesia initiative where she facilitates trainings and skill-building sessions for marginalized girls on gender equality, adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights, and child protection. As a young woman activist in a conservative society, Maya routinely faces challenges. However, she is determined to continue with her mission. Welcome, Maya.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, my name is Maya and I'm from Indonesia. I'm 19 years old and I'm from Youth Coalition for Girls, that is youth-led movement for girls' rights. And I'm really proud and I'm so excited to be in Women Deliver conference, because in Women Deliver we speak up and we also fighting for gender equality. And for me, to achieve gender equality is all about investing in girls' leadership. And I'm a leader, just like so many girls outside there who want to be. And I'm so confident. And I believe that I have the quality to be a leader. Just like I was just being a leader since I was 13 years old. I'm a leader of Student Council in junior and associates in the high school. I'm a leader of Children Forum in my district. And I'm also a leader of girls' movement with Youth Coalition for Girls. But, there is but it's not easy. Yes, that is really not easy. That's really hard for me to be a leader. My experience is, when I was at school, I'm the only girl who ran for the election to be a leader of Student Council. The other candidates were boys. That's all because in my culture in Indonesia, they are expected girls to be quiet. It's impolite for girls to speak up with adults or to speak up or to challenge the adults. That's why from the first time I came here, I still kind of feel weird to speak with adults, just to be honest. And then the other my experiences is that I'm selected to be a leader. And under my leadership, I also challenged the boys who was being the candidates to doing administration and finance that people say or people think that was female jobs. So the point is, boys and girls have the same opportunity, have the same chance, have the same quality, as long as you give the same opportunity to us, so we can choose what we want to be, not choose what you want us to be. Because we have right, as long as you give us the same opportunity. And the other experience is, when I was just attending community meeting about development, that time I'm still 15 years old. And in the room, I'm the only girl who wear school uniform. And I tried to speak up. I raised my hand many times, but the moderator didn't give me a chance because he didn't see me as a leader of Children Forum that time, because I'm really young. And then I'm really upset because I raised my hand more than 2 times. But then the boys beside me, he raised his hand, and the moderator straight away gave him chance to speak up. And then, luckily, he gave the chance to me to speak up. And then I can tell the moderator, I can tell everyone in the room what I was thinking about. And then I was just thinking, gender equality is not only about girls support girls, but it's about men engagement. When boys also have the roles, they can support girls to speak up about what are they thinking about what they want to be. And also, when I was just elected, I think people believe in girls' leadership, but they just didn't want to speak up in front of the public. That's the problems. And I believe that every girl just have the same quality just like me. They can be leaders. Really, they have really chance. They have really good chance. They have a really good quality to be leader, but unfortunately, they just didn't have the opportunity for that. And also, every girls in the world, they want to be leaders. But every girls in the world, they face the same problems. They treated not equal to men when they be leaders. And I want to change this. I really want to change this. And everyone has role to play. So I have 3 demands. The first is I want government to give education to the girls so they can be more confident and they can be empowered leaders. And I want community, public sector, and also everyone to create safe space for girls so they can grow and they can reach into their best potential and they can be more confident to take or to be leader. And the last, the most important is media. All of you who come here to support us to create more content of girls' power, because I believe that media have a really big impact of the society. And also to create more content about women leaders or about empower women, so our girls have more role models and representations. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. We spent the last day holding our governments accountable. Now we'll do the same for our journalist friends here. So you've heard Maya and her declaration. We hope you can cover more stories and more young leaders like Maya. So I know we have a few minutes left, and I would like to take this time to take questions from the floor. So if anyone would like to ask a question, please raise your hand, and one of our 4 panelists here will be happy to answer your question. Okay. Well, hopefully that means you got all the information you need to write your brilliant stories. I would like to say that we have copies on the chairs, key findings for both documents, reports in the back. Question? Okay.
Just wants the report.
Okay, so the report is available also on our websites, www.planinternational.org, as well as www.data.em2030.org. Most information and our URLs on our website are also available in the papers here in the front. If some of the journals in the back didn't get all of our information, it's here in the front. Thank you very much to our 4 speakers today. Your insights and your experiences are incredibly valuable, so I appreciate you taking your time to join us today. And thank you to journalists here today. I know it's been a busy week for you, but we appreciate you coming, hearing about our findings from the report, and we look forward to seeing your stories in the media. Thank you.